The Inheritance of Money. A sacred doctrine of wealth, worth, and the life that was always yours. A note before you begin. This is a book about money. It is not, however, the kind of book about money you have probably read before. It is not a budgeting manual. It is not an investing guide. It is not a list of habits practiced by a small number of people who became wealthy and then wrote a book about how easy it had been. There are plenty of those books, and they are doing their work. This book is about the soul's relationship with money, about the long, mostly invisible conversation that has been running between the deep self and the bank account for as long as you have been alive, about the vows you did not know you took in childhood that have been quietly governing your finances ever since, about the worthiness that was broken at some early age and has, more than any market condition or career choice, been the actual cause of what your life looks like now. These are not standard topics in the financial literature. They are, on close inspection, the real topics, the ones underneath the surface advice that explain why so many people who follow the surface advice still end up decade after decade in the same financial place. I have written this book in the conviction that the advice you have been receiving has been, at best, half a doctrine. It has been telling you what to do. It has been silent about who to be. The being is the part that matters. Until the being is repaired, the doing accomplishes very little. After the being is repaired, almost any reasonable doing produces, eventually, the result. I have drawn, throughout, on the public domain teachings of those who over the last 2,500 years looked at the question of wealth from inside a serious spiritual frame and reported what they saw. Florence Scovel Shinn, Russell Conwell, Charles Hyanel, Marcus Aurelius, the wisdom literature of the Hebrew Bible, Lao Tzu, Rumi in the older translations that are now free, the Hermetic tradition. The voices are old. The doctrine they collectively transmit is not. It is, on close reading, available to you today in the conditions of the world you actually live in, with the kind of nervous system you actually possess. A warning before we begin. This book is not going to comfort you. It will, in places, ask you to look at things about yourself you have been avoiding for a long time. The relationship with money you carry is, almost certainly, more wounded than you have let yourself see, and the wounding is more recoverable than you have let yourself hope. Both of these are uncomfortable to acknowledge. The first is uncomfortable because it requires honesty. The second is uncomfortable because it requires action. But the alternative, the slow, quiet bleed of another decade in the same financial place, the same anxious relationship, the same low-grade hum of not enough under everything you do, on any honest accounting, more uncomfortable than what this book asks of you. Most readers who have made it to this paragraph already know that. Most readers, in the privacy of their own minds, have already been waiting for someone to tell them that the conversation we are about to have is the conversation that needs to happen. I am telling you, the conversation begins now. The inheritance you forgot has been sitting, unclaimed for a long time. Today is the day you remember. Introduction, the inheritance you forgot. There is a story told in different forms in nearly every culture that goes something like this. A child of immense wealth is born into a great house. Before the child is old enough to understand what they have inherited, something happens. A war, a fire, a death, and the child is separated from the family. They are taken in by a poor village somewhere far away. They grow up believing they are a peasant. They eat peasant food. They wear peasant clothes. They take on peasant work, peasant worries, peasant complaints. Decades pass. The child, now an adult, has spent their entire conscious life inside the worldview of poverty. They know themselves, in their bones, as someone who has never had enough and never will. The world has confirmed this assessment 1,000 times. The bank account, the small house, the strained relationships with money, all of it agrees. I am a poor person. This is the kind of life I have. This is the kind of life I will continue to have. Then, one ordinary afternoon, a stranger knocks on the door. The stranger is from the great house. The stranger has been searching for years. The The stranger is carrying papers. The papers establish, beyond legal dispute, that the adult standing in the doorway is the heir to one of the largest fortunes in the country. The story always pauses here, because the dramatic moment is not the inheritance. The dramatic moment is what happens inside the heir. In the older versions of the story, the heir often refuses, at first, to believe what they are being told. The peasant identity is so deep that the documents seem like a trick. "No," they say, "I am not who you think I am. I am a poor person. There has been a mistake. You want some other house." The stranger has to come back, often more than once, before the heir can begin to believe. And even when the belief begins, a second stage opens. The heir, now intellectually persuaded that the inheritance is real, has to do the much harder inner work of becoming someone who has it. Decades of peasant identity do not dissolve in an afternoon. The heir continues, for some time, to think like a peasant, eat like a peasant, speak like a peasant, even after they are nominally rich. Some heirs in the older stories never finish the work. They live out their lives technically wealthy but inwardly still poor, and the wealth in their hands accomplishes very little. This story, in compressed form, is the story this book is about. You are the heir. The inheritance is real. The peasant identity that has been telling you, for as long as you can remember, that you are someone who does not have enough, that is the lie. It was never true. It was inherited from a village you happened to grow up in, by accident of circumstance, and you adopted it because everyone around you had adopted it and because no other identity was available. The papers have arrived. You are reading them now. What this book proposes, with as much directness as I can manage, is that every human being on this planet is, at the level of their deepest soul, a being of immense and unconditional worth, born into a universe whose default state is abundance, equipped with a nervous system designed to participate in the flow of value rather than to be excluded from it. This is not a sentimental claim. It is the central claim of nearly every serious spiritual tradition that has ever examined the question, from the Hebrew prophets to the Hermetic philosophers to the New Thought writers of the early 20th century. The traditions disagree on much. They agree on this. And yet, despite this almost universal agreement, the vast majority of human beings live their entire lives inside the peasant identity. They go to bed every night quietly believing themselves to be a small, struggling, undeserving form of life, surrounded by other small, struggling, undeserving forms of life, in a hostile or indifferent universe in which money is scarce and approval is provisional, and the next disaster is always somewhere on the horizon. They die having never, in any sustained way, contradicted this belief. They die in possession of their full inheritance, which they never opened. The work this book is asking you to do is the work of opening the inheritance. The work has 3 movements. The first movement is the recognition. You have to see the peasant identity as the imported thing that it is. You have to identify the specific vows you took in childhood that have been governing your relationship with money. You have to feel, with full presence, the gap between who the peasant identity says you are and who the deeper self actually is. The second movement is the dismantling. You have to break the vows, not by force, by recognition, by ritual, by the slow daily replacement of peasant thought with the thought of someone who knows who they are. The dismantling is the work of months, sometimes years. It is the central inner labor of the second half of an awakened life. The third movement is the inhabitation. Once the peasant identity has begun to dissolve, the inheritance has to be taken up. You have to learn to receive without shame. You have to learn to give without depletion. You have to learn to be in right relationship with the substance of money, neither worshiping it nor despising it, as one of the many forms in which the universe expresses its abundance through and around you. The chapters that follow walk through these 3 movements in detail. The first half of the book is mostly the recognition and dismantling. The second half is mostly the inhabitation. By the end, if you have walked the path honestly, the relationship you carry with money will have been, in a deep sense, refounded. I cannot promise you a specific dollar amount. The doctrine does not work like that, and any teacher who promises it does is selling something. What I can promise you is that the interior relationship will be different, and that the interior relationship is, on every honest accounting, the cause from which the exterior numbers eventually flow. You are the heir. The papers are in your hands. Begin reading them. Chapter 1. What the Bank Account Knows. Money as the mirror of the inner life. Ye shall know them by their fruits. Matthew 7:16. Your prosperity or your lack of prosperity are an exact reflection of the state of your consciousness. Florence Scovel Shinn, The Game of Life and How to Play It. There is a number somewhere on a screen or a piece of paper that you would prefer not to look at. You know where to find it. You can guess within a small margin what it currently says. It has been hovering, with small variations, around a particular range for a long time now. You have over the years told yourself many stories about why it sits where it sits: the economy, the job, the cost of living, the unfair circumstances of your particular life, the bad luck of having been born to the wrong parents in the wrong place at the wrong time. These stories are not entirely false. They are also not the whole truth. The whole truth, which this chapter exists to deliver, is that the number on the screen is a readout. It has been reporting, with surprising accuracy, on the state of your inner life, the deep beliefs you carry about money, the unconscious vows you took in childhood, the felt sense of your own worthiness, for as long as you have had a financial life. The story you have been telling yourself about why the number is what it is has been, in most cases, a sophisticated form of looking away from the actual data the number was offering you. This chapter is about how to read the data and about what changes when you stop blaming the screen for what the screen has been showing you. The Faithful Mirror. Florence Scovel Shinn, an American teacher who wrote in the 1920s out of a small studio in New York, put the doctrine more directly than almost any other writer of her century. Your prosperity or your lack of prosperity, she wrote in 1925, are an exact reflection of the state of your consciousness. The word that does the work in that sentence is exact. Shinn was not saying that consciousness influences prosperity. She was not saying that there is a correlation on average between the two. She was saying that the bank account, examined honestly, is a mathematically precise readout of the dominant inner state of the person who owns it, not approximately, not on average. Exactly. This is, on first encounter, hard to absorb, because it dismantles the protective architecture by which most people have been explaining their financial lives. The conventional account: I have what I have because of factors largely outside my control, is, in Shinn's framework, the central piece of evasion. Yes, factors outside your control influenced what you started with. Yes, the macroeconomy is real. Yes, luck and birth and accident contribute. And once you became an adult capable of forming and revising beliefs about money, the number on the screen, more than any other single variable, has been the printed-out form of what you actually believe, in the privacy of your own nervous system, about money, worthiness, and the world. The number is a mirror. The mirror is faithful. The mirror has been telling you the truth, what the mirror has been saying. Read your own number with this lens and certain patterns become legible. If the number over years has stayed remarkably stable in the same range, never quite enough, never catastrophically little, fluctuating slightly but always returning to the same set point, the mirror is reporting a set point belief. Somewhere in your nervous system there is an unconscious figure that represents the amount of money it is safe for me to have. Whenever your actual balance climbs above the figure, an unconscious mechanism begins, gently or violently, to bring it back down. Unexpected expenses appear, earnings stall, investments fail, the set point is restored. The mirror has been showing you the set point accurately the whole time, if the number, over years, has shown a recurring pattern of almost arriving and then collapsing, the deal that was about to close and didn't, the inheritance that was promised, and then withdrawn, the windfall that came and disappeared within months. The mirror is reporting a deep belief about your unsuitability for wealth. Somewhere in your inner architecture there's a structure that says, I am not the kind of person who has this, and any time I appear to be becoming that kind of person, the universe must be mistaken and the mistake must be corrected. The collapse is not bad luck. The collapse is the structure performing its function. If the number over years has shown a pattern of abundance followed by self-sabotage, the wealth made and then squandered on something obviously wrong, the income earned and then spent on small consolations, the savings accumulated and then drained by what looked, in hindsight, like an unforced error. The mirror is reporting a guilt structure. Some part of you somewhere believes that having money is a betrayal of someone, your origins, your principles, the people you grew up among, and that part is faithfully sabotaging the wealth in service of the loyalty. If the number over years has shown a pattern of constant emergency, the bills always slightly more than the income, the urgent crisis always landing the week before the cushion would have built up, the financial life functioning as a low-grade ongoing fire, the mirror is reporting a survival identity. The nervous system has organized itself around the experience of urgency and has, beneath conscious awareness, been generating the urgency it has come to need. There are other patterns. These are 4 of the most common. You may, on reading them, recognize one of them as your own. You may recognize a hybrid. You may, more painfully, recognize all 4 operating at different times. Whatever you recognize, the recognition is the beginning of the work. The data the mirror has been offering can finally be read. The 2 wrong responses. Most people, on first absorbing what the mirror has been showing, react in one of 2 ways. Both are mistakes. Both prevent the recovery that the recognition was meant to make possible. The first wrong response is self-blame. The recognition that the inner state is operating gets converted almost immediately into a verdict against the self. I have caused this. I am the kind of person who has this kind of bank account because I am, at the root, deficient. The mirror is reporting my unworthiness, and the unworthiness is true. This is not what the doctrine teaches. The doctrine does not say you are unworthy. The doctrine says that you have been carrying a belief in your unworthiness, a belief almost always installed in childhood by people who themselves had no idea they were installing it, and that this belief, not the truth of who you actually are, has been doing the operative work. The unworthiness is not a fact about you. The unworthiness is a script you inherited. The script can be revised. The truth underneath it is something else entirely, and the rest of this book is about helping you find it. The second wrong response is denial. The recognition gets resisted. No. The doctrine is wrong. The mirror is not faithful. My finances are the way they are because of circumstances. To accept the doctrine would be to blame the victim. I refuse. This response is understandable, but it costs you the recovery. The doctrine is not blaming the victim. It is offering the victim the lever by which they can stop being a victim. The lever is in the inner life. It is the only lever that has ever, in any era, been demonstrably effective at changing financial trajectories that had been frozen for years. To refuse the lever, in the name of preserving the victim narrative, is to choose to remain in the trajectory. Some readers, faced with this choice, will choose to remain. The choice is theirs to make. But the choice is theirs, not the universe's. The right response. The right response to what the mirror is showing is neither self-blame nor denial. It is, in a single word, interest. You become interested in what the data is reporting, not horrified, not defensive, not eager to escape the report, interested, the way an honest scientist is interested in a measurement that contradicts their hypothesis, or the way a skilled doctor is interested in a symptom that doesn't fit the textbook. Something is being shown, something useful. The interest is the posture in which the something can be received. In this posture, you can ask the questions the mirror was always trying to provoke. What belief, if it were operating in me, would lawfully produce the financial pattern I have been living? What unconscious vow, if I had taken it, would explain the set point I keep returning to? What inherited script, if I were running it, would explain the recurring collapses? What loyalty, if I were honoring it, would explain the self-sabotage? These questions, asked in the posture of interest, almost always yield answers. Not in the first session, sometimes in the third, sometimes in the 10th, but the answers come, and the answers are usually, on inspection, embarrassingly specific. Of course, that is what I have been believing. I have known this all along, in some part of me, and have been unwilling, until now, to say it out loud. The saying it out loud is the first move of the recovery. The next moves are the subject of the chapters that follow. The first practice. This week, take an hour, find a quiet place, take a notebook. At the top of a fresh page, write the question, "What does my bank account know about me?" Then write, without editing, for 30 minutes. Do not censor, do not arrange, do not try to be wise. Let the questions and answers and admissions come as they want to come. The voice on the page may say things your conscious mind has not been letting itself hear. Let it. At the end of the 30 minutes, read what you wrote. Underline 3 sentences that surprise you. 3 sentences that, on reading them back, you recognize as more true than you had been willing to admit before sitting down. Those 3 sentences are the first chapters of the readout. The mirror has been waiting patiently for you to read it. You have today finally begun. Chapter 2. The Vows You Did Not Know You Took. How childhood decisions about money are still running your adult finances. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Proverbs 22:6. Whatever man imagines and feels to be true, that he becomes. Whatever he believes about himself, in the unseen will produce. Charles Haanel, The Master Key System. Somewhere between the ages of 4 and 14, you took a series of vows about money. You did not know at the time that you were taking them. They did not feel like vows. They felt like reasonable conclusions about how the world worked, drawn from the small amount of evidence available to you in the limited environment in which you were forming your initial picture of reality. The vows were silent. They were never spoken aloud, never written down, never confirmed by a ritual of any kind. They were nonetheless deeply made, and they have been, from that day to this, binding. This is hard to absorb on first hearing, but it is the sober report of every honest tradition that has ever looked at how human beings come to have the financial lives they have. The deepest decisions about money are not made in adulthood, in the conscious, deliberate way that adults like to imagine. The deepest decisions are made in childhood, often before age 10, often without the conscious mind being aware that decisions were being made at all. The decisions, once made, install themselves in the nervous system. From that point forward, they operate beneath the level of awareness, shaping perception, behavior, and circumstance with the steady force of a tide. This chapter is about how to find the vows, what to do when you have found them, and what becomes possible when, finally, they are released. How a childhood vow is made. Imagine a particular afternoon. You are 7 years old. You are standing in a kitchen or a hallway or the back of a car. Your parents, or whichever adults were doing the parenting, are having an argument. The argument is about money. The argument has happened before. The argument has, in some recurring form, been the background music of your young life. You watch the argument. You feel, without yet having the words for it, the constriction in your stomach that this argument always produces. You see the face of the parent who you most love start to crumple or harden or close. You see the other parent or the absent parent or the substance the parent is using win over the parent you love. You see, with the helpless clarity of a small child, that money is the medium through which this loss has been arriving in your life since before you can remember. In that moment, silently, without ceremony, without anyone in the world noticing, you make a decision. The decision has different forms in different children. I will never put another person through what is being done to my mother right now. I will never have so much money that it makes me into the kind of person who hurts people. I will not be like my father. I will not need money the way the people around me need money. Money is the thing that breaks people I love. I refuse to participate. You are 7. The decision is made by the part of you that is keeping you safe. The decision goes underground, becoming a feature of the architecture rather than a thought you can consciously revisit. The next morning, you go to school. You forget you ever made the decision. The decision continues operating. 40 years later, you are 47, and you cannot understand why. Despite having a perfectly good income and a perfectly good education and a reasonable amount of effort, you cannot quite seem to assemble a financial life that works. You consult experts, you read books, you try strategies. None of them produce the result. You blame the economy, you blame the markets, you blame the difficulty of life in the current era. All of this is missing the point. The vow you took at 7 is still in force, and the vow has been, all along, the operative cause of the result. This is not a metaphor. This is an actual mechanism. It has been described in different vocabularies by every serious tradition that has examined how human beings come to have the lives they have. The Christian tradition describes it as the bond. The Hindu tradition describes it as a vow against one's dharma. The psychoanalytic tradition describes it as an unconscious commitment. The New Thought writers, including Florence Scovel Shinn, described it as a belief held in the subconscious. They are all pointing at the same thing. They are all correct. The common vows. The specific vows take many forms. The same dynamic, childhood witness of harm, silent decision to refuse the harm, lifelong refusal of the thing the harm came through, produces different vows in different people. Here are some of the most common. I will never be greedy. Often taken by children whose parents were either openly grasping or who lived inside a religious or political tradition that taught greed as the central sin. The vow is sincere. The child means well. The unconscious effect in adulthood is to refuse any income or accumulation that could possibly be characterized as greedy. The threshold of greedy is, in such people, set very low. The vow is keeping them poor. I will never become like them. Taken by children of wealthy or upwardly mobile parents whose pursuit of money was felt to have come at the cost of presence, warmth, or moral integrity. The child swears not to become the absent parent, the cold parent, the morally compromised parent. The unconscious effect in adulthood is to keep one's own income below the level at which one could be confused with the rejected parent. Promotion is refused. Success is sabotaged. The vow holds. I will be loyal to my origins, taken by children of working class or poor families whose families have an embedded sense that money belongs to other people, and that to acquire it is to leave one's tribe. The child takes the vow of loyalty. The unconscious effect in adulthood is to refuse to out-earn the family of origin. The earnings climb to a certain level and then mysteriously stop. Opportunities are not pursued. Promotions are declined. The vow holds. I do not deserve more than I have. Taken by children whose parents, often through no fault of their own, were unable to give them adequate love, attention, or affirmation. The child concludes that the deficit was a feature of the child's own deserving rather than the parent's capacity. The vow installs itself. I am not the kind of person to whom much is given. The unconscious effect in adulthood is to refuse by 1,000 small mechanisms the wealth that would have been available to a person who believed they deserved it. Money is dangerous. Taken by children whose families had money and lost it, often dramatically, often within their living memory. The child internalizes the lesson. To have money is to be in danger of losing it, and the losing is unbearable. The vow installs itself. Better never to have it than to risk losing it. The unconscious effect in adulthood is to remain in conditions of structured scarcity, where the loss cannot occur because the having never did. There are others. These are 5 of the most common. Read them slowly and notice which one, on reading it, produces a small involuntary response in the body, a tightening, a quickening, a sudden urge to look away. The body knows. The body has been carrying the vow for decades. The body recognizes itself when its vow is named. Finding your own. The work of finding your own vows is delicate but not difficult. You do not need a therapist, although a good one helps. You need only a quiet hour and the willingness to ask one question. The question is, what was money to the people who raised me? Sit with this. Let the memories come. the specific scenes, the arguments, the silences, the shame, the relief when an unexpected check arrived, the terror when a bill landed, the way your mother's face changed when the subject came up, the way your father's voice changed, the thing that was never spoken about and that was somehow always present. When you have a clear felt sense of what money was in that house, ask the second question. What did I, watching that, decide? The answer almost always comes, sometimes immediately, sometimes after several days of letting the question simmer. The answer is usually a single sentence, often startling in its simplicity, usually familiar to you the moment you hear it. Of course? Yes. That is what I decided. I have known this for years without knowing I knew it. Write the sentence down. The sentence is the vow. The vow has now been seen by the conscious mind for the first time in decades. The mere seeing is half the work. Releasing the vow. The release of the vow has several elements. They cannot be skipped. First, the acknowledgement of the vow as something that was made by a particular version of you in particular circumstances for reasons that made sense at the time. The vow is not foolish. The vow was the small self protecting itself with the only tool available to it in an environment that was producing pain. To acknowledge the vow is to acknowledge the small self that took it and to thank that small self for the protection it was attempting to provide. Second, the recognition that the circumstances which made the vow necessary are no longer the present circumstances. The arguments in the kitchen are over. The parents are either older now or different or gone. The world the vow was protecting against does not exist in the form it existed in then. The vow, in continuing to operate, is protecting an adult against a danger that is, in adult terms, no longer real. Third, the release itself, which is most effectively performed as a small ritual rather than as a thought. Speak the vow aloud in the form in which you took it. I will never become like them. I do not deserve more than I have. Money is dangerous. Then, also aloud, release it. I release this vow. I release it gently. I release it with thanks for the protection it offered. I release it because the version of me who took it is no longer the version of me who is living, and the present version requires a different relationship with money than the vow was permitting. This sounds, to some readers, like ceremony. It is. The unconscious does not respond to argument. The unconscious responds to ritual. To speak the vow aloud and release it is to perform on the unconscious an operation that no amount of conscious analysis can perform. The unconscious recognizes the ritual. The vow loosens. Fourth, the replacement. A vow released without something taking its place tends to reform, in the absence of competing material, in a slightly different shape. So, having released the old vow, install a new one. I am released from the obligation to be poor. I am free to receive what the world is bringing me. I am the kind of person to whom much is given, and the giving does not make me unworthy or disloyal. Speak the new vow aloud. Speak it daily for some weeks until it has begun to take root in the same nervous system territory the old vow occupied. The new vow grows. The old vow withers. The architecture begins by small increments to change. Within a few months, you will begin to notice changes in the financial reality the old vow was holding in place. They will not be dramatic at first. The set point will start to shift. The recurring collapse pattern will start to break. Opportunities you would have refused 6 months ago will begin to appear, and you will, for the first time, find yourself capable of accepting them. You will not feel this as transformation. You will feel it as a quiet alteration in what you allow yourself to have. The vow has been broken. The inheritance is closer. Chapter 3. The Two Wealths. Why most pursuit of money misses the thing it was meant to find. What shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Mark 8:36. He is rich who is content with the least, for content is the wealth of nature. Socrates is quoted by Diogenes Laertius. There are two kinds of wealth on this earth, and most people, after a lifetime of pursuit, end up with neither. This is the central diagnosis of the spiritual literature on money. It is also, on close inspection, the empirical observation of any thoughtful person who has examined the lives of the human beings around them with any honesty. Most people pursue one kind of wealth their whole lives and discover, late, that they did not actually want the kind they were pursuing. The other kind they did want, but they were too busy chasing the first to notice, and so neither arrived. This chapter is about what the two kinds of wealth are, why they are usually pursued in the wrong order, and what it would mean to pursue both at once. The first wealth. The first wealth is the visible kind. The bank account, the house, the car, the investments, the accumulating evidence at the visible level of the life that one is materially provided for and not at the mercy of the next emergency. This wealth is the kind the surrounding culture explicitly trains its members to pursue. It is the kind measured in surveys. It is the kind discussed in financial planning sessions. It is the kind that, when you don't have it, you feel its absence sharply every day in 100 small ways. The first wealth is real. I am not, in this chapter, going to dismiss it. The teachers who dismiss the first wealth, who tell their followers that money is a worldly distraction unworthy of their attention, have, almost without exception, been wealthy themselves, often through the dismissal itself. The doctrine of contempt for money is, more often than not, a tool of those who have it for keeping those who don't from acquiring it. It is not the doctrine this book teaches. The first wealth is real, and acquiring a sufficient supply of it is, for most modern people, a legitimate spiritual project. Money does not corrupt the soul any more than water corrupts the body. Both can drown a person who has too much of them, but the cure for that is not to refuse to drink. The cure is to learn the right relationship. What I'm going to argue, however, is that the first wealth alone is not the destination. It is half the destination. Pursued without the second, it produces a particular kind of suffering that is very specific to those who have achieved it, a suffering whose essential feature is the dawning realization that the long pursuit has not delivered what the pursuit was supposed to deliver. The suffering of the materially wealthy. I have spent enough time around the materially wealthy to have noticed a pattern that the surrounding culture systematically denies. The pattern is this. A person pursues, with great discipline and considerable success, the first wealth. They acquire it. They cross the thresholds the culture had told them all their lives would produce the satisfaction they had been working toward. The first house, the first million, the first level of recognition. They wait, in the days following each crossing, for the satisfaction to arrive. It arrives, briefly, as a small pulse of relief. Then it disappears. Within weeks, the person is back at the same baseline of inner unease they had been at before the threshold was crossed. The bank account is larger, the house is bigger, the car is newer, the unease is unchanged. They had been told all their lives that the unease was caused by the absence of the things now acquired. The unease has not been caused by the absence. The acquisition has not relieved it. The materially wealthy in their honest moments will confirm this. They will tell you, often with a kind of bemused exhaustion, that the wealth has not delivered what they thought it would deliver. They are still themselves. The interior weather is still the interior weather. The relationships are not fundamentally different. The dread at 3 in the morning is not fundamentally different. They had been promised a different person at the other end of the threshold. The person they got was the same person, only with a larger bank account. This is the suffering of the materially wealthy, and it is what makes the first wealth, pursued alone, an ultimately unsatisfying project. The first wealth is necessary, in the sense that its absence produces avoidable suffering. The first wealth is not sufficient, in the sense that its presence does not produce the deeper satisfaction the pursuit was meant to deliver. The second wealth. The second wealth is the one the surrounding culture barely talks about, partly because it is harder to measure, and partly because the surrounding culture has not been particularly successful at producing it. The second wealth is the inner kind. The quality of presence, the depth of relationships, the felt sense of meaning, the absence of chronic anxiety, the moments in which the world reveals itself to be more beautiful and more strange than the surface had suggested. The second wealth is what you would still have if every external thing were taken away. It is the wealth the contemplatives have been pointing at for several thousand years. It is the wealth Marcus Aurelius wrote about in his private journals. It is the wealth Lao Tzu was describing when he said that the man who knows he has enough is rich. The second wealth, like the first, is real. I'm not going to dismiss it. The teachers who dismiss the second wealth, who teach that all such talk is sentimental nonsense and that only the visible numbers matter, have, almost without exception, lives that are visibly missing it. And their dismissal is a self-protective maneuver against the recognition that what they have spent their lives building does not add up to what they wanted. The second wealth, however, is not the destination either. Pursued alone, without any meaningful relationship to the first wealth, it produces its own characteristic suffering. The contemplative who has built a deep inner life but who is constantly anxious about rent, who cannot afford medical care, who is chronically tired from financial stress, has not transcended the first wealth. They have neglected it. The inner life they have constructed is being eroded day by day by the avoidable friction of material insufficiency. They know this. They will not always say it. The second wealth alone is the suffering of the saintly poor. It is real suffering. It is not, despite the romance attached to it in some traditions, the destination either. The integrated life. The destination, this chapter argues, is the integrated life, the life in which both wealths are present in their right proportion, mutually reinforcing. What does this look like in practice? It looks like a person whose material affairs are in sufficient order that they are not consumed daily by financial anxiety. They have enough. They know they have enough. The number on the screen is not the focus of their inner life. It is functioning, the way water functions for a swimmer, as the medium in which they are operating, not as the thing they are constantly attending to. The first wealth is present, but it is not central. It looks simultaneously like a person whose inner life is sufficiently developed that the things which the surrounding culture says should make them happy actually do, while also not being the things they have organized their lives around. They appreciate the meal. They love the people. They notice the morning light. They have moments, weekly if not daily, in which the world reveals itself as the strange and luminous place it has been all along. The second wealth is present, and it is the center. The integration is the exact arrangement nearly every contemplative tradition has in different vocabularies pointed at. The Sufi poets called it the gold of the heart in a hand that holds gold. The Stoics called it virtue practiced in the conditions of plenty. The Christian mystics called it being in the world but not of it. The Vedantic tradition called it the householder's path, the seeker who pursues liberation while engaged in the full responsibilities of family and work and money. They are all describing the same integration. The right order. The integration cannot be built in one move. It is built in the stages. The order matters. Most modern people, raised in a culture that explicitly trains for the first wealth and barely mentions the second, attempt to acquire the first wealth first, and then, having achieved it, expect the second to arrive as a side effect. It does not arrive. The pattern we described in the section above repeats. They are bewildered. The integrated path runs the other way, though it does not skip the first wealth. It begins with the construction of the second wealth, not to a state of sainthood, to a state of minimum sufficient inner stability, enough presence, enough self-knowledge, enough daily practice that the nervous system is no longer running on chronic urgency. From inside that stability, the work of building the first wealth becomes a different kind of work. It is not the desperate scramble of the unstable nervous system trying to acquire, through external means, the stability it cannot produce internally. It is the calm, patient, disciplined construction of material adequacy by a person who is no longer in emergency. Construction performed in this state proceeds differently. Decisions are made more clearly. Greed is recognized and declined. Opportunism is recognized and declined. Honest work is recognized and accepted. The first wealth, built from this inner state, accumulates more reliably and is held more lightly than the same wealth built from desperation. The materially wealthy who have built from the integrated state, when you meet them, have a particular quality. They are not their money. They have it. It does not have them. They sleep at night. This is the order the doctrine teaches. It is the order this book is helping you recover. The chapters that follow continue alternately the work of repairing the inner state and the work of building the outer life, in the conviction that both must be tended and that the inner work has slight precedence over the outer one. You are, in reading this far, undertaking the inner work. The outer construction is what most of the rest of the book is about. The integrated life is the destination, and the integrated life is available to you, in your circumstances, beginning today. The inheritance is both wealths. The papers are still in your hands. Continue reading. Chapter 4, The Sacred Currency. What money actually is, and why you were never told. Money is current and is meant to flow. Florence Scovel Shinn, The Game of Life and How to Play It. Coined money is congealed energy. Russell H. Conwell, Acres of Diamonds. You have been carrying a wrong picture of money in your head for as long as you have had a financial life. The wrong picture goes like this. Money is a finite stack of paper that exists somewhere out there in a definite total amount, distributed among the 8 billion human beings on this planet according to some combination of luck, hustle, and the mysterious workings of the markets. The stack you happen to control is your money. The stack the rich man down the road controls is his money. There is, by implication, a fixed quantity, and the quantity in your hands is in some sort of opposition to the quantity in his. If there were less in his, there would be more in yours. What he has you do not, and vice versa. This picture is not entirely wrong. There is, in any given moment, a measurable quantity of money in circulation. There are stacks. The stacks have owners. So far, the picture is correct. The picture is wrong about the nature of the stacks. It treats money as a static thing, a noun, a substance. Money is none of these. Money is, on its deepest examination, an event, a flow, a current. The stack you happen to own at any given moment is a temporary configuration of a process that is, in its essential nature, in motion. To understand money, you have to stop thinking of it as a stack and start thinking of it as a current. The shift is not a metaphor. It is a correction in your model of what money actually is, and the correction has practical consequences for how money behaves around you. This chapter is about that correction. The 3 layers of money. Money has, on careful inspection, 3 distinct layers. Each layer has its own laws. Most people operate exclusively at the surface layer and are bewildered by the behavior of the deeper ones. The surface layer is money as it appears in daily life. The dollar in your pocket, the figure on the screen, the bill on the table. This is the layer the financial industry talks about and the layer most people see. It is the layer that, when you change it, changes nothing fundamental about your inner state, and that when your inner state changes, slowly conforms to match. The middle layer is money as a measure of value exchanged. Every dollar in your account is, on close inspection, the residue of a transaction in which something was given by someone and something was given in return. Goods were exchanged, services were rendered, risk was taken, skill was applied. The dollar is the receipt of an exchange. It does not exist in isolation. It exists as a token of value already created and exchanged somewhere in the economy of human beings doing things for each other. This is why the old economic textbooks called money a medium of exchange. The phrase is precise. Money is not primarily a thing. It is a medium, a substrate, through which the more fundamental thing, namely value being created and exchanged, moves. To get more money, in this view, you do not primarily need to capture more of the substrate. You need to participate more fully in the underlying flow of value being created and exchanged. The substrate, in proportion to your participation, will accumulate around you naturally. The deep layer is money as frozen energy. This is the layer the spiritual literature has been pointing at. At its deepest, money is the energetic record of human work, attention, care, intention, and time. When someone gives you $100 in exchange for a service, what they are giving you is, in essence, an hour or two of their lifetime, the hour they spent earning that $100 frozen into a transferable form. To accept the $100 is to accept their energy. To spend the $100 is to release that energy back into the flow. This is not metaphor. This is what is actually happening. Every coin in your pocket is the crystallized form of someone's life energy, given in exchange for something they considered to be worth that energy. To handle money carelessly is to handle other people's lives carelessly. To handle money with attention is to handle other people's lives with attention. The old tellers in the older banks knew this. They handled the bills with a particular kind of respect that has, in our era, mostly disappeared. The respect was not for the paper. The respect was for what the paper represented. Why the flow matters. The reason the flow matters beyond the philosophical is that the laws governing the deep layer are different from the laws governing the surface layer. At the surface layer, money behaves like a stack. You can, in principle, accumulate a stack. The larger the stack, the more secure you appear. The strategy is to accumulate. At the deep layer, money behaves like a current. The current is moving regardless of whether your stack is large. To stop the current, to dam it up into a single large stationary stack, is, in the deepest sense, to violate the nature of what money is. Money that has been dammed for too long, in the experience of nearly every wisdom tradition, becomes, in some quiet way, spoiled. It loses its energetic charge. It accumulates without producing the satisfaction that the earning of it had implied. The wealthy miser, at the end of his life, is a recurring figure in the world's literature precisely because the figure is recognizable. He has accumulated. The accumulation has not nourished him. He sits on his stack and starves. The teaching, found in different forms across the wisdom traditions, is that money is meant to flow through you, around you, to you, from you. Like the blood in the body, money loses its life when it stops moving. The body whose blood does not move is a body in trouble. The financial life whose money does not move is a financial life in trouble. This does not mean that you should never save. The old wisdom is in favor of saving. The wise woman puts something aside. The fool spends all, says the Proverbs writer. Saving is part of the flow. The savings, properly understood, are positioned energy, ready to be deployed when the right need or opportunity arrives. The savings are part of the current in a slowed-down form. The savings are not the stagnant pool that the miser confuses them with. The discrimination is between positioned money and frozen money. Positioned money is held in readiness for movement. Frozen money is held in refusal of movement. The first is healthy. The second, over time, is corrosive to the holder and to the surrounding field. The practical consequences. If money is a current, several practical consequences follow that the surface layer view cannot generate. First, the path to having more money is to participate more fully in the flow of value. Most people, focused on the surface layer, try to get more money by capturing it from somewhere outside themselves. This is the strategy of the lottery ticket, the get-rich-quick scheme, the imagined inheritance. It rarely produces sustained wealth, and when it does, the wealth tends not to remain. The deeper strategy is to generate value, to produce something the world wants, to render service that meets a real need, to participate in the existing currents of exchange in a way that adds rather than extracts. Money flows toward those who add to the flow. Money drifts away from those who only attempt to extract from it. Second, the way you treat the money in your possession affects the money that arrives. The miser, who handles money with grasping, signals to the field that money in his hands is held against the flow. The field, lawfully, sends less money to the miser than to a person in the same circumstances who handles money with respect and ease. The careless spender, who handles money with contempt, signals to the field that money is not valued in his hands. The field lawfully sends less money to the careless spender than to a person in the same circumstances who handles money with care. The field is responding to the signal. The signal is the manner in which you handle the substrate. Adjust the manner, and the field, in time, adjusts what it delivers. Third, the velocity of your participation matters more than the size of your stack. A small business with a healthy turnover of value, money flowing in, value flowing out, customers being served, debts being paid, is, in the deep view, a healthier financial entity than a larger business with a frozen balance sheet. The principle scales down to the individual. A person whose financial life involves irregular, healthy exchanges of value, earning, paying, giving, receiving, all in motion, is healthier than a person of equivalent net worth whose financial life is mostly the maintenance of a static balance. You can, in your own life, observe the velocity. Are bills paid on time? Is money received cleanly, without inner objection? Is generosity practiced regularly, even in small forms? Is value being added by you to the flow that surrounds you? These are not moral questions, they are diagnostic questions. The answers describe the velocity of your participation in the current. The first practice. Take this week a small action to increase the velocity of money in your life. Pay a bill earlier than required. Send a small amount of money to someone who provided you with value, but whom you have not yet thanked materially. Tip the barista more than is expected. Leave a generous review of a service that was, in fact, generous. Buy something from a small business rather than the cheapest provider. These actions are not by themselves going to make you rich. That is not the point. The point is that they alter the signal you are sending into the field. They train your nervous system to participate in the current rather than to clutch at the stack. The training, over weeks, accumulates. The nervous system begins in subtle ways to function as a healthy node in the flow rather than as a closed valve. Over months, you will notice that money begins to behave differently around you, not dramatically, slightly. Opportunities will appear that would have been invisible. Unexpected small inflows will arrive. The friction around routine financial exchanges will reduce. You are becoming, by the patient practice of right participation, the kind of person around whom the current moves cleanly. The current has been moving the whole time. You have at last stepped into it on purpose. Chapter 5. Worthiness and the Broken Transmission. Why the universe's generosity has been returned to sender. According to your faith, be it unto you. Matthew 9:29. There is enough for everyone if each takes only what he needs and shares the rest with those who do not yet have. Russell H. Conwell, Acres of Diamonds. There is a particular quality of failure that haunts the spiritually inclined seeker. The seeker has been doing the work. They have read the books. They have done the visualizations. They have spoken the affirmations. They have practiced the gratitude. They have, in many cases, made significant progress on the inner life. They are, by their own account, a more present, more loving, more awakened person than they were 5 years ago. The inner life is genuinely better. And yet, the outer life, particularly the financial portion of the outer life, has not changed, or has changed only marginally, or has, on close inspection, gotten slightly worse, even as the inner life has improved. The seeker is bewildered. The doctrine, they have been told, predicts that the outer follows the inner. They have improved the inner. The outer has not followed. They begin, quietly, to suspect that the doctrine is broken. The doctrine is not broken. Something else is broken, and this chapter is about what? The thing that is broken is not the doctrine. It is the worthiness signal, the inner permission granted by the deep self to itself to receive what the doctrine is bringing. The doctrine is sending. The deep self, unconsciously, is returning to sender. The packages have been addressed correctly. The packages have been refused at the door, often without the conscious mind being aware that any refusal was occurring. This chapter is about the worthiness signal, about how it is broken in most modern people, about how it can be repaired, and about why the repair, once made, often produces faster external changes than years of any other practice. The original wound. Almost every modern adult is operating beneath the surface with a damaged worthiness signal. The damage was almost always installed in childhood by mechanisms that the parents involved would have been horrified to know they were employing. The mechanisms are not, in most cases, dramatic. They are the small, repeated, ordinary failures of love that accumulate in a developing nervous system into a permanent low-grade conviction that one is not, at the deepest level, enough. The conviction takes various forms. I am too much. I am not enough. I am loved when I perform and withheld from when I do not. I have to earn my place. I am, by some quality I cannot quite name, less than the people around me are. The world owes me less than it owes them. These are the reports of the damaged worthiness signal. They are not, on examination, true. They are also not, in most cases, things the conscious adult would consciously affirm. The adult, asked directly, would say, of course I am worthy. Of course I deserve good things. Of course the universe is open to me. The adult would mean it. And underneath, in the operative layer of the nervous system, the older signal, installed at age 6, never updated, would still be running. The doctrine of manifestation, the practice of visioning, the affirmations on the bathroom mirror, none of these reach the operative layer if the worthiness signal is broken. They reach the surface mind. They produce a temporary improvement in surface mood. They do not change the signal that the deep self is sending into the substance, and the substance is responding to the signal, not to the surface. This is the technical reason why so much spiritual practice produces so little external change. The practice is being performed at the wrong layer. The repair must be made at the layer where the original wound was made. Until the repair is made, the rest of the doctrine cannot operate fully. The repair. Repairing the worthiness signal is delicate work. It cannot be done by argument. The deep self does not respond to argument. It responds to what could be called re-witnessing. The deep self came to its conclusion about its worth by being, for years in early childhood, witnessed in particular ways. It was witnessed inadequately. It was witnessed conditionally. It was witnessed as a problem, or as an extension of a parent, or as an instrument for someone else's purposes. The witnessing was the soil in which the conclusion grew. To revise the conclusion, the deep self has to be, at some point in adulthood, witnessed differently, witnessed adequately, witnessed unconditionally, witnessed as itself without instrumentalization. This re-witnessing can come from several sources. A great therapist can provide it. A great teacher can provide it. A particular kind of loving relationship sustained over time can provide it. A spiritual practice, performed with the right inner posture, can provide it. In the absence of any of these, you can also provide it for yourself, though the work is slower and harder. The practice is to become, by deliberate inner shift, the witness that the deep self never received in childhood. This sounds abstract. In practice, it is concrete. You sit daily for 10 minutes with the deep self. You bring to mind, with full feeling, the version of you that is 6 or 4, or whatever age the original wound was made at. You see them. You see what they were carrying. You see the assumption they made in those early years about why love was being withheld or why approval was being conditional. You feel, on their behalf, the grief of that assumption. And then, from the position of the adult you witness them adequately. You speak to them in your inner voice the words they did not hear at the time. You were not the problem. You did nothing wrong. The thing you concluded about yourself on the basis of how you were treated was not a true conclusion. It was the only conclusion available to you with the data you had. The data was incomplete. You were always worthy. The withholding you experienced was not a measure of your worth. It was a measure of the limits of the people around you. You can release the conclusion now. You are seen, finally, by someone who knows the truth. This sounds, to some readers, like therapy in self-administered form. It is. Applied consistently, once a day for some weeks, it begins, slowly, to repair the worthiness signal at the layer where it was originally damaged. The repair in action. You will know the repair's beginning when several specific things start to occur. First, you will notice yourself, with some bemusement, accepting compliments that, for most of your adult life, you would have deflected. Someone says something kind about your work, And instead of the automatic, "Oh, it was nothing," you find yourself saying thank you in the body of someone who actually receives the kindness rather than batting it away. The deflection has been a worthiness symptom. The receiving is a worthiness repair. Second, you will notice yourself for the first time asking for what you actually want, in conversations, in negotiations, in your own private inner planning. The asking before the repair was constrained by the unconscious belief that you do not deserve what you would want, and the constraint operated by simply not asking. After the repair, the asking is possible. The world, hearing the asking, often gives. Things you had been quietly avoiding for years begin to become available. Third, you will notice an alteration in your relationship with money specifically. Bills you had been dreading become slightly less dreaded. The bank balance, when consulted, produces less spike of anxiety. Decisions about spending become slightly clearer. Opportunities, when offered, are evaluated on their actual merits rather than refused in advance, because I am not the kind of person who. The financial life, in subtle ways, begins to function more cleanly. Fourth, and most remarkably, you will notice that material things begin to arrive in your life that, in the older configuration, you would have refused to allow yourself. Not always large things, often small things at first. The unexpected gift, the unsolicited opportunity, the strangely generous offer from someone who had no obligation to make it, the deep self, having been witnessed adequately, has stopped returning these things to sender. The packages, instead of being refused at the door, are being accepted. Continue the practice. The repair deepens. The hard truth. There is a hard truth that I want to deliver before this chapter closes, because the truth is operative in the recovery. The truth is that no amount of external evidence will, by itself, repair the worthiness signal. You can become a millionaire and still not feel worthy. You can be loved by a wonderful partner and still not feel worthy. You can accumulate every external marker of value the surrounding culture can produce, and still at 3 a.m. not feel worthy. The signal is not reachable from the outside. The external evidence, no matter how abundant, cannot do the work. This is the hard truth, and it is also the liberating one, because it means that you do not have to wait for sufficient external evidence to repair the signal. The repair can begin today in the conditions you currently have with the practices described in this chapter. The signal can be repaired in advance of the external life that the broken signal had been preventing. And once the signal is repaired, the external life, which had been waiting for permission to assemble, begins lawfully to assemble. Most people hearing this will continue to wait for the external evidence. They will say, "Let me get the money first, and then I will work on the worthiness." The doctrine does not work in that order. The order it works in is the inner first, the outer in response to the inner. Begin the inner repair now, in the absence of the external evidence, and the external evidence will follow. This is what the wisdom traditions have, in different vocabularies, been saying for thousands of years. The witness who can finally see you for who you are is, in the end, the one looking back at you in the mirror. You can today become that witness. The deep self, which has been waiting, will recognize the witness has finally arrived. The signal will, in time, repair. And the inheritance, addressed correctly all along, will begin finally to be received. Chapter 6. The Shadow of Money. The hidden contempt that is repelling what you say you want. He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver. Ecclesiastes 5:10. You cannot serve God and mammon. Matthew 6:24. The deepest reason most spiritually inclined people remain financially constrained is not, as is sometimes claimed, a lack of inner work. They have in many cases done a great deal of inner work. The reason is something more specific and more uncomfortable and harder to name. The reason is that they hold beneath the surface of their conscious mind a deep and unacknowledged contempt for money, and the contempt, mixed with their conscious desire for it, produces a vibrational signal that the substance reads as profoundly mixed. The substance, lawfully, does not deliver clearly to a mixed signal. The seeker conscious only of their stated desire, cannot understand why the doctrine is not delivering. The doctrine is delivering exactly what was sent. The contempt, of which the seeker is unaware, was part of what was sent. This chapter is about the shadow of money, about the hidden contempt that is, almost always, present in the spiritually inclined seeker, about how to find it, and about how to integrate it so that the signal you are actually sending becomes, for the first time, congruent with what you say you want. Where the contempt comes from. The contempt for money has, in the spiritually inclined seeker, several common sources. The first source is religious inheritance. Most readers of this book were raised, directly or indirectly, in cultures shaped by religious traditions whose foundational texts contain strong warnings against wealth. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth. These passages, in their original contexts, were correcting specific abuses of wealth in particular communities. They were not, in their original intent, blanket condemnations of money itself. But the readers, especially the children who absorbed these passages over the centuries, did not always retain the nuance. The passages got compressed in cultural transmission into a simpler message. Money is spiritually suspect. Truly good people are not concerned with it. The genuinely awakened soul looks down on those who pursue it. The compressed message has been operating quietly for 2,000 years in Western Christian cultures, and the descendants of those cultures, even if they have explicitly rejected the religion, often inherited the compressed message about money along with the cradle song of their childhood. The second source is political inheritance. Many readers were raised in or formed by traditions of political thought that view wealth as morally suspect. The wealthy are exploiters. The accumulation of money is, by structure, the exploitation of someone. The pursuit of money is participation in a system of harm. There is, again, real and important content in these critiques. They are not entirely wrong. But the absorbed message, often without the original critique's nuance, becomes a blanket discomfort with wealth itself. To want money is to be on the wrong side. To have money is to be complicit. The truly ethical person stays poor. The third source is family inheritance. Many readers grew up in families where wealth was, in some way, the enemy. Either the family was poor and the wealthy were experienced as the cause of the poverty, or the family had been wealthy and lost it, and the loss was experienced as the wealth's revenge, or the family was wealthy and dysfunctional, and the wealth was felt to be intertwined with the dysfunction. In each case, the child absorbs an emotional position toward wealth that has nothing to do with conscious philosophical conviction. The position is body level. The child who watched their grandfather drink himself to death on his money does not, in adulthood, intellectually believe that money causes alcoholism. The child's nervous system, however, has filed money under the substance that destroys the men I love, and the filing operates beneath the level of conscious belief. These three sources, in different combinations, produce the contempt. The contempt is not philosophical, it is visceral. And because it is visceral, it cannot be argued out of existence. It can only be found, named, and integrated. Finding your contempt. The contempt in the spiritually inclined seeker is usually defended by a particular kind of denial. The seeker will say sincerely, "I have nothing against money. I just don't want it to be the most important thing. I want it to come, but in the right way, for the right reasons, in the right amount, without compromising my values." This sounds reasonable. It is also in most cases where the contempt is hiding. The contempt manifests in the qualifications, in the right way, for the right reasons, in the right amount, without compromising my values. Each qualification is a small no attached to the yes. The substance, hearing the yes and the no together, hears a profound mixed message. The mixed message does not produce results. To find your own contempt, the practice is to ask yourself, in writing, the following questions, and to write the first thing that comes to mind without editing. If I had $10 million, what kind of person would I become? Watch your answer carefully. If your answer contains anywhere Words like greedy, out of touch, disconnected, lazy, spoiled, not myself, or any of their cousins, you have located a piece of the contempt. Some part of you believes that having money would, by mechanism, turn you into a person you do not want to be. The part is operating to prevent the money from arriving. What kind of person tends to have a lot of money? If your answer contains, anywhere, the suggestion that wealthy people are predominantly different from you in moral character, more selfish, more shallow, more compromised, less spiritually awake, you have located another piece. Some part of you is convinced that to be wealthy, you would have to become like them. The part is operating to prevent the becoming. What would my poor relatives think of me if I became wealthy? If the answer involves any version of they would not understand me, I would lose them. I would have betrayed where I came from. You have located a loyalty piece. Some part of you is keeping yourself poor in order to remain loyal to the people you came from. The loyalty is operating to prevent the inheritance. These questions asked honestly reveal the contempt. The contempt is almost always present. The first work is to see it. Integrating the contempt. The contempt cannot be argued away. It cannot be talked out of existence. The attempt to do so produces, at best, a thinner conscious denial under which the contempt continues to operate at the unconscious level. The integration is not the elimination of the contempt. It is the seeing and holding of the contempt as one part of you, alongside the yes to wealth as another part. Both parts are now visible. Both parts are now in conversation. The mixed signal can become, with time, a coherent signal. Coherent because it includes both, rather than incoherent, because it pretends to be one when both are present. The practice of integration looks like this. When you notice the contempt arising, when a wealthy person on television produces in you an automatic disgust, when an opportunity arises that would significantly increase your income, and you find yourself, mysteriously, wanting to refuse it, when you catch yourself making a small, contemptuous comment about money or those who have it, pause. Do not push the contempt away. Do not pretend it isn't there. Do not feel guilty for having it. Instead, acknowledge it. Hello. I see that some part of me believes wealth is corrupting. I see that some part of me believes wealthy people are different from me in ways I find suspect. I see that some part of me is afraid that having more money would make me into the kind of person I do not want to be. Then, in the same breath, hold the yes alongside it. And I also know that money is, in itself, neutral. I know that wealthy people, when they do not let wealth corrupt them, are no different from poor people who do not let poverty embitter them. I know that I am not, by character, the kind of person who would be corrupted by money. I know that the inheritance is mine, and I want to claim it. This holding of both, the contempt and the yes, without trying to resolve them, is the integration. With time, the holding produces, in the deep self, a more honest relationship with money than the suppressed contempt was permitting. The contempt no longer needs to operate underground. It has been seen. It has been heard. It can sit in the inner architecture as a recognized piece without any longer dictating the financial signal that goes out from you. The signal, freed from the underground contempt, becomes coherent. The substance, hearing a coherent signal, can finally deliver. This is why the integration of the shadow of money, more than almost any other inner practice, often produces dramatic external changes. The seeker who has done all the other work but has neglected this one has been, without knowing it, holding the door closed against the very thing they were asking to come in. The integration unlocks the door. The thing that had been waiting for years on the other side, finally able to enter, enters. You may, after this chapter, find that change in your financial life appears more quickly than you expected. Do not be surprised. The door, after all, was only ever locked by you. Chapter 7. The Wealthy Universe. Why scarcity is a perceptual error and not a feature of reality. Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. Yet I say unto you, that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Matthew 6:28-29. There is no lack except in our own minds. The supply is always equal to the demand, and an abundance is always at hand. Charles Haanel, The Master Key System. Walk today into any genuinely natural environment. A forest, an old meadow, a stretch of unmanaged coastline. Stand still for 10 minutes. Look around. You will see in any direction you look an abundance that is almost embarrassing in its scale. Trees that produce, in a single season, more leaves than you could count in a year. A meadow that throws up, in the course of one summer, more flowers than the whole human race could pick before they wilted. A coastline whose tide pools contain more life forms in a square meter than the average city block contains in human inhabitants. The natural world, when you actually look at it, is not impoverished. The natural world is, in its default state, extravagantly abundant. This is not the world most modern people imagine themselves to be living in. The modern person, raised on a steady diet of news about scarcity, environmental crisis, economic limits, and zero-sum competition, walks through a world they imagine to be diminishing, a world running out of resources, a world in which there is not enough to go around, a world in which their own attempts to acquire what they need are necessarily in competition with the attempts of others. The world the modern person believes themselves to live in is the scarcity universe. The natural world examined directly is not the scarcity universe. The natural world is the abundance universe. The two universes do not coexist. They are alternative perceptions of the same underlying reality, and the perception you happen to inhabit determines with great precision the kind of life you are able to have. This chapter is about the abundance universe, about the evidence that it is, in fact, the universe we live in, about why the scarcity perception has nonetheless become so dominant, and about how to begin, daily, to re-inhabit the perception that has been available to you all along beneath the cultural noise. The cosmological argument. The case for the abundance universe is older than any economic theory. It is, on close inspection, the case nearly every traditional cosmology has made for as long as there have been traditional cosmologies. The Hebrew cosmology begins with a creator who, on each day of creation, looks at what has been made and pronounces it good. The world in this cosmology is not a grudging concession from a stingy deity. It is the deliberate, generous, repeatedly affirmed work of a being whose nature is creative abundance. The Creator does not run out of creating. The next day brings more creation, and the creation, having been brought into being, continues to generate. The plants bring forth seeds, the seeds bring forth more plants. The abundance is, by structure, recursive. The Hindu cosmology arrives at the same conclusion through a different door. The universe is the play, the lila, of a divine consciousness whose nature is creative joy. The play does not exhaust itself. New universes are continually being generated, dissolved, regenerated. There is no scarcity at the cosmic level. There is, in fact, the opposite of scarcity, a continuous overflow of being into form. The Hermetic philosophy, transmitted through Greek and Egyptian traditions, made the same claim in still another vocabulary. The all, in this view, is not a finite substance whose pieces compete with each other for room. The all is, by its nature, infinite. To take from one part is not to deplete another part. The fundamental substance of reality is, in its essence, more than enough. These cosmologies are not data, in the modern sense. They are reports from the contemplatives who, having looked carefully, came back with the same news. The news summarized, the universe is, in its deepest nature, abundant. You will say, reasonably, but real human beings starve. Real human beings cannot afford their medicine. Real human beings die in poverty. The cosmological abundance, even if it exists at some lofty level, does not seem to reach the actual lives of the actual poor. This is a fair objection, and it deserves a careful answer. The careful answer is that the abundance of the universe is real, and the experienced scarcity in many human lives is also real, and the two are not contradictory. The abundance is the underlying condition. The scarcity is what happens when human social and economic systems, operating from inside a scarcity belief, fail to distribute the underlying abundance to the human beings inside them. The belief produces the systems. The systems produce the experienced scarcity. The underlying abundance remains available but inaccessible to those whom the systems exclude. The argument of this chapter is therefore not that no one is poor. The argument is that the universe is not the cause of poverty. The cause of poverty is the operation of human systems built on scarcity beliefs in defiance of the abundance the universe is in fact offering. The remedy, at the individual level, is to begin re-inhabiting the abundance perception even before one's external circumstances reflect the abundance. Doing so begins, lawfully, to alter what one is able to receive from the underlying field. Doing so on enough scale would also begin to alter the systems that have been blocking the field's abundance from reaching enough people. The daily evidence. You can begin in your own life to verify the abundance of the universe by looking, deliberately, in the directions you have been trained not to look. Look at the sky. The sky is free. It has been free your entire life. You have never been billed for it. The sky is, by any measure, one of the most spectacular phenomena in your immediate environment, and you have access to it daily at no cost. The abundance has been overhead the whole time. Look at the air. You've been breathing since the moment of your birth, an unmetered, uncharged, perfectly available substance in quantities that no one has ever asked you to ration. The air is so abundant that the modern industrial system has been able to dump centuries of pollution into it without exhausting the supply. The abundance is in your lungs. Look at the sunlight. The sun pours every morning an immense quantity of usable energy onto your particular patch of ground, free of charge, with such reliability that after several billion years of pouring, no one expects it to stop tomorrow. The abundance is on your face. Look at the water in your tap. The water has, in most modern cities, traveled a long way to arrive at your tap, and someone has charged you for the infrastructure of its delivery. But the water itself, in its underlying nature, is part of a global cycle of evaporation, precipitation, and flow that has been operating abundantly for several billion years. You are participating in the cycle. The water is, in essence, a gift the planet has been making for as long as you have been here. Look at your own body. Your body is composed of trillions of cells, each of which is performing every second more biochemical reactions than any human-built system could perform. You did not pay for the manufacture of the body. You did not pay for its maintenance. The body, in its default state, repairs itself, manages itself, adjusts itself, all without your conscious input. The abundance is what is reading these words. These observations are obvious. The reason they have to be made is that the modern person has been trained to not see them. The training is the scarcity belief, operating at the perceptual level. Once you begin, deliberately, to see what was always there, the perception begins to reorient. The reorientation, sustained, alters the field of what you are able to receive. The doctrine, at this point in our examination, returns us to its central claim. The inner state is the cause of the outer life. The practice. Each morning, for 1 week, before consulting any device or any news, sit for 5 minutes. Look out the nearest window. List in your mind 10 abundances you can see or sense from where you sit. The trees outside the window, the light on the wall, the heat in the room, the water in the glass, the breath in your chest, the clothes on your body, the roof over your head, the morning sound of traffic, which is the sound of millions of people going about the elaborate cooperative project of running a civilization on your behalf, the food in the kitchen, which the same civilization, without your asking, has put within your reach, the lover, friend, child, or animal who is, somewhere in your life, available for you to love. Some of these you possess only marginally, some abundantly. The point is not the inventory. The point is the retraining of perception. Most modern people, on first attempting this exercise, report that within a few days the world has begun to look, to them, slightly different. Not because the world has changed, because the perception has changed. They are, perhaps for the first time in their adult lives, seeing the abundance the universe has been holding out the whole time. The seeing is not the result. The seeing is the cause. From the abundance perception, a different inner state arises. From the different inner state, a different financial signal goes out. From the different signal, a different external trajectory begins, lawfully to be assembled. The universe has been wealthy the whole time. You have at last begun to notice. Chapter 8. The Service That Pays. Why money follows value, not effort. Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. Ecclesiastes 9:10. Greatness consists in doing great deeds with little means, in the accomplishment of vast purposes from the private ranks of life. Russell H. Conwell, Acres of Diamonds. There is a misconception about money, common among the spiritually inclined and equally common among the spiritually skeptical, that has prevented more people from becoming wealthy than almost any other single error. The misconception is that money flows toward those who work hard. It does not. It has never done so. The world is full of people who work very hard and remain poor. The world is also full of people who do not appear, by any visible measure, to work particularly hard, and who nonetheless become wealthy. If money flowed reliably toward effort, these two populations would not exist. The fact that they exist is the evidence that the model is wrong. The correct model, on close inspection, is that money flows toward value. Money goes to those who, by some mechanism, have arranged their lives so that they are generating value, value that other human beings, freely, are willing to exchange their own money for. The generation of value is sometimes the result of hard work. It is sometimes the result of cleverness. It is sometimes the result of being in the right place at the right time. It is sometimes the result of inherited capital that allows value to be generated through other people's labor. The mechanisms vary. The principle is constant. Money flows toward value. Effort, divorced from value, produces only exhaustion. This chapter is about what value actually is, about why most people are not generating it, and about how, in your own life, you can begin to organize your work in such a way that money begins naturally to flow toward you. The definition of value. Value, in the economic sense, is anything that another human being is willing, freely, to exchange resources for. The willingness is the test. If someone, in possession of their full faculties and their own resources, will give you money in exchange for what you are offering, you have produced value. If no one will, you have not. This is a hard test, and most modern people have spent very little of their lives applying it to their own work. The hard test produces uncomfortable observations. Many activities people perform full-time for 40 hours a week are not generating value in the test sense. They are expending energy. They are fulfilling a job description. They are being present at a workplace. None of these are the same as generating value. The energy expended is real. The value produced is sometimes nothing. Many other activities people regard as not real work: a parent reading to a child, an artist painting in a studio with no commercial application, a retired person tending a garden, are, by the test, generating massive value. The child is being formed. The world contains a painting that did not exist before. The garden produces flowers and vegetables and a peaceful corner of the world. These activities, on the value test, are productive. They simply do not always produce exchanged value. The discrimination between generated value and exchanged value matters because it explains a great deal about why the world looks the way it looks. Money flows specifically toward exchanged value, the kind that has been formalized into a transaction. A great parent generates enormous value but receives no money for it because the value has not been formalized into an exchange the surrounding economy recognizes. A mediocre middle manager generates relatively little value but receives substantial money for it because the formalized exchange is in place. The system is, in this respect, blind to value as such. It pays for the transaction, not the underlying generation. This is unfair. It is also the system. To make money inside it, you have to do two things at once. You have to generate value, which most people do not, and you have to formalize the value into an exchange that the system recognizes, which most people do not. Doing both produces wealth. Doing only one, value without exchange or exchange without value, produces poverty or exhaustion. What people you know are worth. Take for a moment the people in your life, not all of them, 5 or 6. Now ask yourself, for each of them, 2 questions. What value does this person actually generate in the broad sense, through their work, their presence, their care, their skill? How much of that value have they managed to formalize into exchanges that the surrounding economy will pay them for? You will notice, doing this exercise, that the people whose lives are financially comfortable are the ones for whom both answers are substantial. They generate value, and they have arranged for the value to be exchanged in ways the system pays for. You will also notice, more uncomfortably, that some of the people you most love and admire, the ones whose presence has shaped you most, whose contributions to the world are most undeniable, have not arranged for adequate exchange of their value. They are, in many cases, financially constrained, despite the obvious enormity of what they generate. The system, blind to unformalized value, is not paying them what they are worth. They are paying in their financial lives for the absence of the formalization. This pattern repeats in your own life in any way that you have been generating without formalizing. Are you a brilliant cook who feeds people for free? An exceptional listener whose friends rely on you in ways that are valuable but unmonetized? A natural teacher whose explanations have shaped colleagues and family but never been part of any structured offering? A skilled organizer who manages crises in your community at no formal compensation? In each of these cases, you are generating real value, and the surrounding economy is taking it without compensation, and you are wondering why your bank account is what it is. I am not here advocating that you begin charging your friends for emotional support. The genuine work of love, freely given, is real and not for sale. I am observing that the patterns of generosity you have been running in some areas of your life may have, over time, accustomed both you and the people around you to the assumption that what you produce is free. The formalization of even a portion of your value into structured exchange is one of the more direct ways to alter the financial trajectory of your life. The service only you can render. There is, in addition, a deeper question hidden underneath the value question, and the deeper question is what the spiritual literature has, in different vocabularies, been pointing at for as long as the literature has existed. The deeper question is, what is the particular value that only you, of all the human beings now alive, are uniquely positioned to render? Every human being has one. The contention of nearly every wisdom tradition that has examined this question is that each soul comes into a lifetime carrying a particular contribution that no other soul could make in exactly the same way. The contribution is sometimes obvious, sometimes hidden, sometimes still being discovered late in life. It is rarely the contribution the surrounding culture would have nominated for you. It is, almost without exception, the one that arises most naturally when you are not performing for anyone and not trying to be impressive. The Hindu tradition called this your dharma. The Greek philosophical tradition called it something close to your telos, your particular purpose, the function for which your specific configuration of qualities was designed. The medieval Christian tradition called it your vocation in the older sense, the call your soul was responding to before the world had taught you to respond to other calls. When you are doing the work of your dharma, 3 things happen at once. First, your inner state is different. Time disappears. The work feels both demanding and effortless in a way that no other kind of work has ever felt. You return from a session of it not depleted, but in some way more alive than you began. The body knows when it is doing what it was made for. Second, your work generates value at a rate the surrounding economy notices. Even imperfect early efforts in the Dharma direction often produce results that more polished work in the wrong direction never produced. The substance, you might say, recognizes the alignment. The world, hearing the alignment, responds. Third, the financial trajectory shifts. sometimes slowly, sometimes shockingly fast. The income that had been refused to you for years in the wrong work begins to appear when the right work is taken up. This is not because the universe is rewarding your discovery of Dharma. It is because the world will pay in real money for the unique service you alone can render and refuses to pay beyond a survival level for service that anyone else could equally render. Most people never discover their Dharma. They die having spent 40 years rendering generic service for which they were paid generically, adequately perhaps, but never abundantly. The abundance, on inspection, is reserved for those whose service is specific and irreplaceable. Beginning the work. If you do not yet know what your Dharma is, the first work is to begin paying attention. Pay attention to the activities that produce in you the experience described above, the disappearance of time, the simultaneous demand and effortlessness, the post-session aliveness. These activities are pointing at something. They are not in themselves necessarily the Dharma, but the Dharma is in their direction. Pay attention to the responses other people have to you. What are you, without strain, better at than nearly everyone you know? What do strangers spontaneously thank you for? What have you done at 3 different points in your life with 3 different purposes that nonetheless produce the same kind of grateful response from those who experienced it? The pattern points at something. The pattern is your signal. Pay attention to the longing that, despite your suppression of it, will not go away. The longing you keep returning to in your private journal. The thing you keep almost beginning. The path you keep half considering, then setting aside as impractical. The longing has not gone away because it is, on the level of the soul, real. The impracticality is, almost always, surface impracticality. The deeper impracticality is the impracticality of not answering it. The Dharma reveals itself, sometimes quickly, sometimes over years. The pattern with attention becomes legible. Once you have a sense of the direction, begin to render service in that direction, not in a grand life-changing way. In small, daily rendered ways. The blog post, the free class, the newsletter to 12 people. The service offered at first almost as an experiment. The service is the seed. From the seed in time, the formalized exchange grows. This is the path the genuinely wealthy have more often than not walked. They did not get rich by working harder than the rest of us. They got rich by finding the service only they could render, rendering it daily and arranging for the rendering to be exchanged. The wealth was the lawful consequence of the alignment. The same is available to you. The first move is to begin paying attention. The second move is to begin rendering daily in the direction of what you are paying attention to. The third move is to allow the rendering to be formalized and to be paid for what you, uniquely, are giving. This is the service that pays. Chapter 9. The Discipline of Receiving. Why so many spiritual people are bad at allowing themselves to have. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Matthew 7:7. Most people have very poor receiving capacities. They block their own good through fear, doubt, and the habit of refusing what is offered. Florence Scovel Shinn, your word is your wand. There is an asymmetry, very common in the spiritually inclined seeker, between their capacity to give and their capacity to receive. The seeker, asked to give, has been giving their whole life. They give their time, they give their attention, they give their care. They give their work, often in excess of what is paid for. They give to friends in trouble. They give to strangers in need. They give to causes. They give, generally, with grace. The same seeker, offered something, struggles. The compliment is deflected. The gift is rejected, often with an apologetic smile. The kind offer is met with, "Oh, you don't have to do that." The unexpected windfall, when it appears, produces a peculiar kind of unease. I shouldn't accept this. This isn't really mine. There must be a catch. The receiving muscle, which the seeker would never tolerate being weak in their giving life, has been allowed to atrophy almost entirely. This is not, despite how it presents, modesty. It is a worthiness symptom. The deep self, carrying its quiet conviction of inadequacy, refuses what is offered because the deep self does not believe itself entitled to receive. The refusal feels, on the surface, virtuous. The seeker congratulates themselves on not being greedy, not being demanding, not being a taker. Underneath, the seeker is repelling the very abundance the rest of their practice has been asking the universe to deliver. This chapter is about the discipline of receiving, about why it is harder than giving, and about how, with practice, it can be developed into a clean, full-bodied capacity to let in what the world is, in fact, offering. Why spiritual people are bad at receiving. The spiritually inclined seeker is, in most cases, bad at receiving for 3 reasons that overlap. The first reason is the worthiness wound we examined in Chapter 5. The deep self, convinced of its own inadequacy, deflects what would contradict the conviction. Each accepted gift, accepted compliment, accepted gesture of care is a small piece of evidence against the conviction, and the conviction, in self-defense, refuses the evidence. The deflection is automatic. The conviction remains intact. The second reason is moral confusion about giving. The seeker has internalized, often through religious or political tradition, the idea that giving is virtuous. They have not, in most cases, internalized the corollary that being able to give requires a corresponding capacity to receive. The seeker imagines they can be a one-way valve, pure giver, never receiver, and that this represents some particularly elevated form of life. It does not. The one-way giver runs out of resources. The exhaustion is the system telling them that the valve is broken. The third reason is fear of indebtedness. To receive, in some part of the seeker's nervous system, is to incur an obligation. They will, having received, owe something. They will be, in some way, in the giver's power. They prefer the position of giver, in part, because the position of giver leaves them in control. To receive is to surrender control, however briefly. The fear of the surrender is the fear of being, again, in the position they were in as a child, vulnerable, dependent, at the mercy of someone else's goodwill. These 3 reasons combine, in different proportions in different people, to produce the seeker who cannot receive. The seeker has been arguing with the universe, often for decades, that they want abundance. The universe has, in many cases, been trying to send the abundance. The seeker has, with each delivery, refused at the door. The universe is not, despite the surface appearance, withholding. The seeker has been blocking. The receiving practice. Receiving, like any other faculty, can be trained. The training is uncomfortable at first because it requires the seeker to do the very thing they have been avoiding. The discomfort is the work. The first practice is the practice of the clean thank you. When someone gives you something, a compliment, a gift, a favor, a kind gesture, your only assignment is to say thank you. Not, oh, you didn't have to. Not, it was nothing. Not, you shouldn't have. Not the elaborate apologetic deflection most spiritual seekers have built into their nervous system over decades. Just thank you. Receive. Allow the giving to land. Allow the giver to feel the satisfaction of having given. Allow yourself, over the course of a single sentence, to be on the receiving end of what is being offered. This is harder than it looks. The first time you try, you will notice an almost involuntary pull toward the deflection. The pull is the worthiness wound objecting to the receipt. Override the pull. Say only thank you. The world will not collapse. The giver will not regret what they gave. The transaction, finally, will have completed cleanly. Practiced for a few weeks, the clean thank you begins to repair the receiving muscle. The seeker, who has been deflecting their entire adult life, begins to discover that allowing things to land is, after the initial discomfort, good. The body, which had been organizing itself around refusal, begins to organize itself around acceptance. The energetic signature of the seeker, in the field, shifts from blocker to receiver. The substance, reading the new signature, begins to deliver to a person who, for the first time in years, is open to delivery. The second practice is the practice of asking for what you want. Most spiritual seekers do not ask for what they want. They have been taught that asking is grasping, that desire is suspect, that the truly spiritual person waits to be offered. This teaching has, in some traditions, a place. As a general operating mode for an adult life, it is disastrous. The world, in nearly every domain, gives what is asked for and withholds what is not. The promotion goes to the person who asked, the discount goes to the person who asked, the opportunity goes to the person who said, "I would like that, please." The seeker who has been waiting silently for the right things to be offered to them is waiting in most cases in vain. The world has not been refusing. The world has not been asked. The practice is to begin asking for small things. Ask for the seat by the window on the train. Ask for the discount on the slightly damaged item. Ask for the better appointment time. Ask of a friend for the favor you have been hesitant to request. Ask of a colleague for the introduction you have been telling yourself you don't deserve. The asking as a daily practice is the training. You will discover, with some surprise, that asking is met far more often than you expected with a yes. The world has been waiting for you to declare what you want. It has been holding the thing in reserve for you, in many cases, for years. The asking unlocks it. The third practice is the practice of receiving money cleanly. When money arrives, paychecks, gifts, refunds, unexpected windfalls, your assignment is to let it in. Not to feel guilty for it, not to immediately spend it on someone else as a way of not having it. Not to discount its meaning by saying, "Oh, it's not very much." Receive, acknowledge the value, allow the funds to land in your account and to be there as a piece of supply. This sounds trivial. For many seekers, it is the hardest practice in the chapter. The arrival of money produces in them an almost immediate need to disperse, deflect, or downplay it. The need is the worthiness wound again, this time activated by the most charged form of supply the modern world delivers. Override the need. Let the money sit in the account for at least a week before any decision about what to do with it. Notice what arises in the body during that week, the unease, the impatience, the various stories about why you don't deserve it. Sit with all of them. Let them pass. After a few weeks of this, the body begins to relax around the presence of money. The presence of supply, which had been triggering the worthiness wound, becomes, with time, an experience that does not trigger anything in particular. The supply has been received. The seeker, finally, has the capacity to hold what arrives. The substance, having found a holder rather than a refuser, can begin to send more. This is the discipline of receiving. It is, for the spiritually inclined seeker, often the most operative single practice in the entire doctrine. More practiced than visioning, more effective than affirmation, more dispositive than action. Because, until receiving is repaired, none of the other practices can deliver to a person who is refusing the delivery. Repair the receiver. The deliveries, accumulating for years on the doorstep, can finally come in. Chapter 10. The Discipline of Giving. How to complete the cycle without depleting the source. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, and shaken together, and running over. Luke 6:38. It is more blessed to give than to receive. Acts 20:35. The discipline of giving is the second half of the cycle, and it is, for the well-trained spiritual seeker at least, the easier half. This chapter is therefore short. It is short because the seekers who will read this book have in most cases given more than enough already. They have given themselves into exhaustion. They have given to people who did not appreciate it. They have given to causes that did not need quite so much of them. They have given because they were afraid not to give, or because giving was the price of belonging, or because giving was the only currency in which they felt, briefly, valuable. What this chapter is not going to do is exhort you to give more. What this chapter is going to do is help you find the form of giving that actually completes the cycle, that releases what is in your hand, completes the flow, and returns to you in the lawful operation of the doctrine more than it took. The two forms of giving. There are, on close inspection, two distinct forms of giving, and they have very different consequences in the giver's life. The first form is depleted giving. This is giving that comes from a place of obligation, fear, guilt, or the unconscious belief that one's worth is contingent on what one gives. The depleted giver gives because they have to, because they will be punished if they don't, because they cannot bear to be seen as ungenerous, because they believe that giving is the price of being loved. The giving does not come from fullness. It comes from fear of what will happen if they do not give. Depleted giving has a particular signature in the body. It is accompanied by a small clenching, a quiet resentment, a felt sense of something being taken from me. The depleted giver smiles while giving and complains internally afterwards. They wake up tired. They build over years, a kind of compounding exhaustion that no amount of self-care can quite resolve. They are giving, and the giving, mysteriously, is not generative. It is taking from them more than it is leaving behind. The second form is generative giving. This is giving that arises from a felt sense of fullness, a sense that one has been given enough, that there is something to share, that the sharing is the natural expression of the having. The generative giver gives because they want to, because the giving feels like a continuation of the receiving they have themselves enjoyed, because the substance in their life is, in fact, plentiful enough that giving away some of it does not deplete the supply. Generative giving has a different signature. It is accompanied by warmth, satisfaction, ease. The generative giver wakes up the next day not tired, but in some quiet way, more energized than they would otherwise have been. They are not giving from their own scarcity to fill someone else's. They are participating in the larger flow of abundance that, having reached them, is now moving through them onward. The doctrine, in its operational form, is in favor of generative giving and against depleted giving. This is not a moral preference, it is a mechanical observation. Depleted giving, sustained over time, produces a depleted giver. The depleted giver, despite all their giving, ends up impoverished, sometimes financially, more often spiritually, often both. The world cannot, by any mechanism the doctrine knows, multiply scarcity. To give from scarcity is to amplify the scarcity. Generative giving, sustained over time, produces an increasingly generative giver. The flow that moves through them is replenished by what moves through them. The substance, which honors the participation in the flow rather than the size of the gift, returns to the generative giver more than the giver was passing along. This is what the old spiritual teachings, when they said it is more blessed to give than to receive, were describing. They were not commanding, they were reporting. The generative giver receives, in the lawful operation of the cycle, more than they give. Not always in the same currency, not always immediately, but over time, reliably. The tithe. There is an old practice found in different forms in nearly every religious tradition called the tithe. The literal practice is to give away a fixed percentage, often 10%, of one's income to causes outside oneself. The percentage varies. The principle is constant. The principle is that a portion of what flows in must flow out on purpose for the cycle to remain healthy. The modern reader, raised on more or less secular assumptions, often dismisses the tithe as an artifact of religious obligation. The dismissal, on close examination, is mistaken. The practice is not, in its deepest form, religious. It is mechanical. It is the recognition that money, like the blood in the body, does not function well when none of it is moving outward. Some portion has to be released on purpose for the flow to continue. The amount is not the point. Some teachers insist on 10%, some insist on more, some on less. The amount that works for you is the amount that, when you give it, does not produce the depleted giving signature. The amount you can give from generative posture, sustainably, indefinitely. For some readers that is 10%. For some it is 2. For some, beginning the practice for the first time, it is 1. The practice is to begin with whatever amount produces the right inner posture and to maintain it consistently. The tithe, sustained, alters the giver's relationship with money. The giver, by the simple weekly or monthly practice of releasing a portion of what arrives, begins to experience money as something that flows through them rather than as something that they accumulate. The accumulating posture, which had been blocking the flow, begins to dissolve. The flowing posture takes its place. The flow around the new posture increases. This is not, as some teachers have claimed, a magic trick. There is no mystical mechanism by which giving away 10% produces a corresponding 100% return. The mechanism is more subtle. The mechanism is that the regular practice of generative release retrains the giver's nervous system to participate in the flow rather than to clutch at the stack. The retrained nervous system attracts and holds money differently. Over years, the difference compounds. The tither, on average, ends up with more than the non-tither. This is, on the historical record, what tends to happen. Where to direct the giving? The question of where to direct the giving is, for the modern reader, often more complicated than it was for traditional adherents. The traditional adherent gave to the church, the temple, the local poor, institutions whose claim was clear and whose role in the giver's life was already established. The modern reader, in most cases, is not embedded in such an institution. They have to choose. The doctrine offers in this matter a useful guide. The giving is most generative when it goes to value the giver themselves has personally received from. The newsletter that has, for years, made your week better. The teacher whose work has shaped your inner life. The local cafe that has been your refuge. The artist whose work hangs on your wall. The cause whose effects you have in some specific way, witnessed in your own life or in the lives of people close to you. Giving to these is generative because the giver is, in giving, acknowledging the value they have already received. The acknowledgement completes the original receiving. The cycle is sealed. The substance, which had been waiting for the seal, can now move on to deliver more, into a giver whose receivings are now being closed cleanly rather than left as energetic loose ends. Giving to abstract causes the giver has no personal relationship with, distant institutions, far-off populations, generalized organizations, is not necessarily wrong, but it is, in the operative sense, the doctrine tracks, less generative. The giver, in such giving, is often performing a kind of obligation rather than completing a felt cycle. The giving is fine. It is not by itself the operative practice the doctrine is recommending. If you have not yet established a giving practice, begin where you have personally received. The giving will be small at first. The seal it places will not be small. The doctrine will, in time, do its work. The quiet truth. There is a quiet truth that most teachers of money, even good ones, fail to mention. The quiet truth is that the people who are most successful at the doctrine, most successful in the integrated sense of having both wealths, the outer and the inner, in healthy proportion, are, in nearly every case, people who give substantially. Not because they are nobler than the rest of us, because the giving is the practice that keeps the doctrine running cleanly in their lives. You can verify this by paying attention. The wealthy who are also at peace with their wealth, almost without exception, tithe in some form. The wealthy who are anxious, defensive, and grasping, almost without exception, do not. The correlation is not coincidence. It is the lawful operation of what we have been describing through this chapter. If you would like to be the first kind of person, the wealthy who are at peace, the practice has been described. Begin where you have received. Give in whatever amount keeps you in generative posture. Continue, monthly, consistently for the rest of your life. The cycle, sealed at the giving end, completes. The flow, returning, multiplies. Chapter 11, The Integrated Life. What all of this, combined, actually builds. Then shall thy peace be as a river, and thy righteousness as the waves of the sea. Isaiah 48:18. He who is contented is rich. Lao Tzu Tao Te Ching. We have come a long way through this small book. We have walked through the bank account as mirror, through the unconscious vows of childhood, through the two wealths and the wrong order in which most people pursue them, through the deep nature of money as flowing energy, through the broken worthiness signal that has been refusing the universe's deliveries, through the hidden contempt that has been mixed in with conscious desire, through the abundance of the universe that the cultural noise has been hiding, through the service only you can render, through the discipline of receiving, through the discipline of giving. Each of these has been a distinct piece. Each has its own argument. Each can be practiced separately. In this final chapter before the epilogue, I want to draw all of them together because they are, when seen rightly, Not separate practices, but a single practice in different forms. The practice of becoming, finally, the kind of person who can hold the inheritance that has been waiting. The integration. The integrated life, the life this book has been pointing at, has on close inspection several recognizable features. The first feature is that the inner state has changed. The seeker who undertakes the doctrine and walks through it patiently arrives, somewhere on the other side, as a person whose relationship with money is fundamentally different from the relationship they began with. The chronic anxiety is gone. The unconscious vows have been broken. The worthiness signal is functional. The hidden contempt has been integrated. The abundance perception has been installed. The seeker is no longer the same person, and the person they have become has access to deliveries the original seeker could not have received. The second feature is that the outer life has lawfully begun to conform, not in most cases dramatically, slowly. The set point has shifted upward. The recurring collapses have stopped. Opportunities that the broken signal had been refusing are now being noticed. Decisions are being made from a place of clarity rather than panic. The bank account, while not yet what the seeker imagines for the eventual destination, is moving in a direction it had not moved in for years. The third feature is that the meaning of money has changed. The seeker no longer experiences money as the substance whose absence is the cause of all their suffering or whose presence would cure all their problems. They experience money as a medium, one of several, through which value, energy, and care move in the world. They are no longer worshiping it. They are no longer despising it. They are using it well, in service of a life whose center is elsewhere. The fourth feature is the most subtle and the most important. The seeker has, in the process of the doctrine, become a person who can hold abundance cleanly. The wealth, when it arrives in fuller form, and in most cases with patient practice, it does arrive in fuller form, does not corrupt them. It does not change them into someone unrecognizable. It does not separate them from the people they love. It simply gives them more capacity in service of who they had already become through the work of becoming. This is the integrated life. It is not the life of the simple wealthy person. It is not the life of the saintly poor. It is the life that combines the visible adequacy of the first with the inner stability of the second in a single unified walking person. Why the integration matters. The integration matters for two reasons. The first is that the integrated life is, in nearly every measure, the most desirable form of life available to a modern human being. It contains the ordinary satisfactions of material adequacy without the chronic underlying anxiety that money produces in those who do not have enough. It contains the ordinary satisfactions of inner work without the deprivation that the saintly poor accept as the price. It is, on any honest reckoning, the form of life most readers of this book actually want, even if they would not have phrased it this way at the start. The second reason is structural. The integrated life is, more than any other form, durable. The wealthy without the inner work tend to lose their wealth in any number of ways. Divorce, addiction, business collapse, the slow erosion of meaning that produces, in time, the decisions that destroy what was built. The saintly poor without the outer adequacy tend to break, eventually, under the slow accumulating friction of insufficient resources. Both forms, undiluted, have systematic failure modes. The integrated life does not have these failure modes. The wealth, supported by the inner work, does not erode the way unsupported wealth erodes. The inner stability, supported by the outer adequacy, does not break the way unsupported saintliness breaks. The two halves stabilize each other. The whole is more durable than either alone. This is why the wisdom traditions, in their most mature forms, have always pointed at integration rather than at either extreme. The mature traditions have not condemned wealth, and they have not worshipped it. They have asked their adherents to become the kind of person who could hold wealth without being held by it, and to ensure that what they held was being held in the right hands, namely, hands that had done the inner work necessary to use it well. You are, in reading this far, undertaking that becoming. The slow construction. The integration is not built in a season. It is built in years. There are no shortcuts. The doctrine, performed for 90 days, will produce a noticeable shift in the inner state. The shift is real. It is also small. The doctrine, performed for a year, will produce in nearly every case the first lawful evidence in the visible life that the substance has begun to deliver to the changed inner state. The evidence may be modest. It will be real. The doctrine, performed for 3 years, will produce a person you would not yet recognize. The relationship with money will be transformed. The visible affairs will have begun to assemble themselves in directions that, 3 years earlier, you would have considered impossible. The two wealths will be present in their right proportion in operating form. The doctrine, performed for 10 years, produces, by the lawful accumulation of consistent days, the kind of life that the surrounding culture admires without understanding. The wealthy who are also at peace, the peaceful who are also adequately provided for, the integrated person whose outer life and inner life are finally in agreement, and whose presence in any environment quietly elevates the environment around them. This is the destination. It is not glamorous, it is not dramatic, it is durable, real, and available to anyone willing to do the work for the duration the work requires. You are today, several chapters in. You will not feel, day by day, that anything dramatic is occurring. The drama is the wrong measure. The integration is built in the unglamorous, repeated, daily practices the chapters have described. Continue them. The destination, by the lawful operation of the doctrine, will arrive. It is closer today than it was when you began this book. It is closer than you currently feel. Epilogue. What the money was always trying to tell you. We come, finally, to the close. You have, by this point, walked through the doctrine in some form. You have seen what your bank account has been showing you. You have begun, perhaps, to identify the unconscious vows that have been governing your finances since childhood. You have understood that there are two wealths, not one, and that the integrated life requires both. You have seen money as a flowing current rather than a static stack. You have begun the work of repairing the worthiness signal. You have located the hidden contempt and started the slow practice of integration. You have begun to perceive the abundance the universe has been offering. You have considered the service only you can render. You have started, in small daily ways, the disciplines of receiving and giving. This is a great deal to have undertaken in the course of one short book. You will not have absorbed all of it on the first reading. You're not supposed to. Different chapters will land at different times in the years ahead, depending on what your life happens to be teaching you when you next pick up the book. The book is now in you. It will be working on you whether or not you remember it is. The doctrine, distilled to a single sentence, is this: the relationship you have with money is the relationship you have with your own worth, expressed in financial form. Repair the relationship with worth, and the relationship with money repairs as a consequence. Refuse to repair the worth, and no amount of financial strategy will produce a sustainable change in the financial life. The two are not separable. They are, on close inspection, the same problem dressed in two different costumes. This sentence has been the underlying argument of every chapter. You can hold it as a kind of compass for the rest of your life. When you encounter a financial difficulty that resists the conventional remedies, ask yourself what the difficulty is showing you about your relationship with worth. The answer almost always reveals the operative work. The work, performed at the worth layer, produces the change at the financial layer that the surface remedies could not produce. There is a piece of news, before we close, that I want to deliver explicitly. The news is that the money has, in some sense, been on your side this whole time. You have perhaps experienced money as the enemy, the thing that has been withheld, the thing that has caused conflict, the thing whose absence has structured the suffering of your life. The framing is understandable. It is also, on the deeper view, a misreading. Money, on the deeper view, has been the messenger. Every chronic financial difficulty in your life has been pointing, with surprising precision, at an inner condition that needed your attention. The set point has been showing you the unconscious belief about how much you are allowed. The recurring collapse has been showing you the unconscious refusal of your own wealth. The chronic emergency has been showing you the survival identity you had been constructing. The lack you have experienced has not been a punishment from a stingy universe. It has been a tutor, patient, persistent, refusing to let you avoid the inner conditions until you finally turned around and looked. You are turning around in this book and looking. The tutor, having been recognized, can begin to change form. The chronic difficulty, no longer required to deliver its message, can begin to dissolve. The inheritance, which the difficulty had been pointing at the whole time, can finally be received. This is what the spiritual teachers across traditions have been quietly trying to communicate to anyone who would listen. The world is not against you. The world has, all along, been for you in ways the surface life rarely acknowledges. The difficulties were the curriculum. You have, in undertaking this book, finally enrolled in the course. The daily continuation. The work, after the book closes, continues. Each morning, take 5 minutes, sit. Take the abundance inventory of Chapter 7. Then, briefly, hold the felt sense of the financial life you are constructing, not as fantasy, as inhabited image. Allow gratitude in advance for what is forming. Throughout the day, watch for the worthiness wound. When it activates, and it will, in 1,000 small forms, meet it, witness it, speak to the version of yourself who took the wound. Repair in small daily increments. Each week, give. Some portion of what flows in flows out on purpose in generative form. The amount is not the point. The practice is. Each week also receive. Accept the compliments cleanly. Allow the gifts to land. Ask for what you want. The receiving muscle, neglected for decades, requires the practice. Each month, take stock. Where has the inner state shifted? Where's the outer life beginning, in subtle ways, to follow? The shifts are real. They are easier to notice in retrospect than in the moment. Each year, on a particular date you choose, sit and review. The seeker who began this book a year before will, on most accountings, no longer be the seeker reviewing. Honor the becoming. It is your work. It has been your work the whole time. The inheritance now. The inheritance, in its full form, is not a number on a screen. The number is the smallest part. The inheritance is the integrated life, the wealth and the worth, the outer and the inner, the two hands of the discipline working together. It is the life of the person who has done what these chapters have asked, who has done it in their own time, in their own way, in the conditions of their own life, and who has walked, year by year, into a configuration that the original seeker could not have imagined. The inheritance is real. It has been waiting for you for as long as you have been alive. It has been waiting because it has been your inheritance, no one else's, and you are the only person who could ever have come to claim it. The papers were always in your hands. You opened them in a small, unspectacular way when you began this book. You will continue opening them, slowly, over the rest of your life. What was always yours will, in time, be visible to you and to everyone around you as yours. This is the destination. This is the inheritance. This is the doctrine the wisdom traditions, in their patient way, have been holding for you across the centuries, waiting for the day you would, finally, be ready to receive it. You have today begun. Walk well. Appendix, 12 Practices for the Inheritance. The principles in this book are useless without practice. Below are 12 practices drawn from across the chapters that you can begin in your real life this week. Pick 3, stay with them for a season, add the rest as the first 3 become stable. 1. The bank account witness. Once a week on the same day, sit with your accounts, not to budget, to witness. Notice what arises in the body. What is the mirror reporting today? Note one observation without judgment in a notebook. 2. The vow inventory. Once this month, take an hour. Ask yourself, what was money to the people who raised me, and what did I watching decide? Write the vow in a single sentence, speak it aloud, then release it, then install a replacement, also in a single sentence. Speak the replacement aloud daily for 30 days. 3. The 2 wealths check. Each morning, ask, what does the inner wealth need today? Each evening, ask, what does the outer wealth need today? Both. Every day, the integration is in the double attention. 4. The velocity action. Once a week, Take one small action that increases the velocity of money in your life. Pay an invoice early. Tip generously. Buy from a small business. Send a thank you accompanied by a small payment. The action retrains the nervous system to participate in flow. 5. The adequate witnessing. Once a day, sit for 5 minutes with the version of yourself who took the original worthiness wound. Witness them adequately. Speak to them in your inner voice, the words they did not hear at the time. The repair is in the daily speaking. 6. The contempt audit. Once a week, ask yourself, what did I notice this week about my relationship with wealthy people, with money itself, with the prospect of having more? Write the answer without editing. The contempt, once seen, begins to integrate. 7. The abundance inventory. Each morning, before any device, list 10 abundances visible from where you sit. The retraining of perception is the foundation of the financial signal. 8. The service direction. Once a week, ask, what did I do this week that produced in me the disappearance of time and the feeling of doing what I was made for? Track the answers. The pattern over months points at the Dharma. 9. The clean thank you. When given a compliment, gift, or kindness, your only assignment is thank you. No deflection, no qualification. The receiving muscle is built one clean acceptance at a time. 10. The asking practice. Once a day, ask the world for something small you want. The seat by the window, the discount, the favor. The asking unlocks what the silence has been refusing. 11. The tithe. A fixed percentage given monthly to value the giver themselves has personally received from. The amount is not the point. The consistency is. 12. The yearly review. On a date you choose, sit and review the year. Where has the inner state shifted? Where has the outer life begun to follow? The accumulation is more visible in retrospect than in the moment. 12 practices. Pick 3. Begin tonight. The inheritance has been waiting for you. The work is the opening. Thank you for listening. The inheritance of money, maybe it was meant to. Before you go, please like this video and subscribe for more audiobooks, reflections, and manifestation teachings. It helps this message reach the next person who needs it. To purchase the full book, click the link in the video description below. The book is called The Inheritance of Money, A Sacred Doctrine of Wealth Worth and the Life That Was Always Yours. I also have a free gift for you. You can download The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles. This timeless classic has inspired readers for more than a century, and it continues to shape modern ideas about wealth, mindset, and manifestation. To get your free copy, go to manifestingcat.com/science. The link is also in the description below. Thank you again for listening, and remember, you did not find this by accident. This book found you. The field manual is in your hands. The work begins now.